All right, here we go. This is the Bet Tank Podcast. I'm your host, Sleepy J. You guys can find me on Twitter at SleepyJ_pregame. Joined here by the football guru. Got Uncle Dave in the house. You guys can find him on Twitter as well at Dave_Essler. What Uncle Dave and I are going to do today, we're going to cover the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we're going to go ahead and recommend a play on the over 9.5 season wins for Jacksonville. Uncle Dave, you're right down there in the neck of the woods. You kind of have a pretty good idea of the pulse that surrounds this team, kind of, what the fan base is thinking, how they're feeling. How's everything kind of looking right now for Jacksonville, down in your neck of the woods?
Well, I mean, the fan base is pretty excited after last year, and prior to the second half of last year when they turned it on, and that stadium was lucky to be 2/3 full, which in an NFL venue that's ridiculous. So I know they sold out the last few games. They sold out the playoff game. So the fans are pretty energized, and I think for good reason, really. I'm actually excited about the prospects of Jacksonville this week, and I took the over, as you well know, and I think you agree with me.
You know what's weird, Uncle Dave, is that when I heard you say that you like this over, I had to think about if this was like the trendy pick. And I'm going back and I'm listening to everybody, and everybody's like, oh yeah, Jaguars over, Jaguars over. And I have to think, I'm like, why is Uncle Dave on the over? I could tell you right now that you're not on it because it's a trendy pick. Because normally, you pretty much like to go against the grain with that. You like to find reasons why the trendy pick is the wrong side. But when you generally go ahead and you follow, let's just say like follow the masses into a trendy pick, it tells me that you're probably more than likely right on this one because you normally don't do this. So that's kind of encouraging to me. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like I'm guessing like you kind of feel the same way as I do. Like this is a trendy pick, but the fact that you really like this, it makes me feel a whole hell of a lot better that I like the over as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had to check myself because you're right. I tend to not want to uh, follow the lemmings over a cliff. So, I dug really deep to make sure I was doing the right thing. And, you know, I know, I know the expectations are high, but I think internally they're even higher, and for good reason. I mean, if you look at last year, they started 2-6, but five of those six games were five of those six losses were one score games, and I think they started 2-6 because they were still in hangover mode from Urban Meyer. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, he ruined Trevor Lawrence's rookie season. He ruined the whole team. But once they put it back together, they finished the season 7-2 with five straight to close it out, and five of those seven wins were also one score games. So they figured out how to win in a complete 180. I mean, the bottom line, Sleepy, I don't think people realize just how good this Jacksonville team is or can be.
I like the fact that this team ended the year the way that they did. I mean, what did they win? 7 out of like their last 9 games. Like that's a good way to go ahead and end your year. And all those close games too. It's kind of like that coulda, woulda, shoulda. Like we could have won 10 games last year or 11 games last year. But I think coming into this year, they're going to feel pretty good about themselves. They're going to end up, in my opinion, Uncle Dave, they play in the weakest division in the league right now. And if you look at who they play out of division, they're going to end up playing the NFC South, who I think a lot of people would probably agree that that's a pretty much weak division as well. Now, they will play some tough teams this year. They're going to have the Chiefs, the Saints, the 49ers, the Bengals, Browns, Ravens. Like, those are all pretty good teams. But what I like about this schedule, the way it's kind of set up for them this year, is like, yeah, they have a tough game, but then there's a winnable game next. It's like there's always something on the horizon, for this Jaguars team that if they do let down and they do lose a game, that it's not like they have to go through like these grueling stretches. There's always seems like there's a win on the horizon when they play some of those tougher games. So I like that pretty much. I currently right now have this team's schedule right around 7th rated in the league. So number one schedule would be the easiest, 32 would be the hardest. I think that the Jaguars schedule, as I said, with the NFC South and their current division being rather down this year, that this is like one of the easier schedules in the league. And I think that's one of the reasons, why they're at 9.5 right now. I don't know how much you dug into the schedule there, Uncle Dave. Is there anything that you see that you really like, or are there any like major concerns?
No, I mean it's all positive. I mean, you mentioned it. The NFC South is an elite, and and the Colts and Texans are going to face two rookie quarterbacks twice. I'm leery of Tennessee. They're okay with Tannehill, but yeah, and they do face Mahomes and Joe Burrow if he's healthy, and Lamar Jackson. But all three of those are actually at home, and their only sort of late season potential cold weather game that you always worry about is at Cleveland. And we don't know how Cleveland's going to be, but it's also early December, so it might not be that bad. So I think as well that they do have a very favorable schedule.
You know what I like most about this team there, Uncle Dave, is that like Trevor Lawrence, it was tank for Trevor, right? It was get this kid in there, and people were a little concerned like his first year, but he was joining a team that was an absolute mess, but they grew out of that, and they grew out of that as you were talking about in the second half of the year. Not only him, but guys like Travis Etienne, guys like Ingram, the tight end. I mean, I don't know where he came from. I mean, nobody could get that guy to play good football. He started to play really well. Same thing with Kirk. But what I like most about this team coming into this year is the fact that they have Calvin Ridley. And I know a lot of people might have actually forgot about him because he was hurt for a year. He got suspended for a year, but I think people kind of forgot how good this guy was when he stopped playing football. Legitimately, he was probably a top five wide receiver in 2020. He went out, he had 90 catches his final year, 1,375 yards, nine touchdowns, and that was with like an aging Matt Ryan. I think he's very, very explosive, and I think he kind of adds that element to a team that a lot of teams out there simply don't have. And let's just say Calvin Ridley. I don't think a lot of people are going to say like he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver, maybe not even a top 20 wide receiver. But there's no doubt that there's real talent there. So let's just say he picks up where he left off. Like what would we be saying? Let's say this Jaguars team picked up Devontae Adams, and I'm not saying Ridley is Devontae Adams, but when Ridley stepped off the football field, he was playing just as good as a top five wide receiver. So let's just say Devontae Adams was on this team, we would be oohing and ahhing left and right. But it seems like there's not a lot of noise being made, Uncle Dave, about the fact that they're adding a guy like Calvin Ridley. But in my estimation, and this was only because I went ahead and I picked him up in fantasy the year that he was going to have his best year, arguably. So I think that this is like a major piece that a lot of people just aren't talking about. And I think that even though this is like a 9.5, 10 win team, that this guy could easily put them over and put them in a conversation where they're one of the AFC's best teams. Like I legitimately think that he's going to finish the year as like a top 10 wide receiver. And I think that that's what people are missing. So I don't know if you looked into him, Uncle Dave, or if you have any insight or thoughts on Calvin Ridley, but I think could be one of the biggest offseason steals out of any team in the entire league.
Yeah, I mean I don't disagree with you. I mean you mentioned his stats. Between him and Kirk and Zay Jones, I mean I think they're one of the deepest wide receiver groups in the league. That last year they picked up Chris Kirk, and typically free agents with some sort of momentum behind him, expectations, if you will, don't live up to him. But he had his best year in the NFL. I mean, he had 84 receptions and 1,100 yards. So you add Zay Jones last year, he's had a year with Lawrence and Ridley, and Ridley doesn't have to be elite. He's going to get his. He's going to get his. There's no doubt about it. So I totally agree with you, and I think the biggest thing for me here, Sleepy, with this whole, I had a running back. Obviously, you mentioned Eddie N. They drafted Tank Bigsby out of Auburn, and I got Jermichael Hasty, who used to be a starter as a third string guy. So, I mean, so they got an elite offense. They drafted a right tackle out of Oklahoma. Last year, they brought in I can't remember the guy's name. Brandon Scherf, that's who it was. I mean, he was immediately their best lineman. But I think this is Doug Peterson. I mean, the talent's gotten better, but he's the right coach for this team. And I think more specifically, he's the right coach for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Peterson worked with Andy Reid and had a similar trajectory with Philadelphia. When he was in his first year, the Eagles started 1-5, and then Reid gave Peterson the play calling duties. Well, the Eagles won their last 10 games and the Super Bowl, much to my chagrin. But, 3 years later, he's the head coach and loses Carson Wentz and wins the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. I mean, under Peterson, Lawrence cut his interceptions in half, threw twice as many touchdowns, and his QBR went up 20 points. And in my opinion, remember, this guy was like the second coming of John Elway or Andrew Luck out of Stanford when they came into the league. And I think he's got much more room to develop. So I think we're going to see something similar this season. So I think it's a combination of a ton of things that are all like the stars are all aligned. I guess is the best way to put that.
Well, I mean, I could say this about Peterson. Like, I've been critical of him, and a lot of it has to go back to his days in Philadelphia. I think the way to word this here, Uncle Dave, is that if he gets bored, he starts taking way too many risks. And he did that in Philadelphia, but like you said, like he started out, he got the playbook, got that offense rolling after a little bit. And then it was year 2, year 3, like they really picked it up. But it seemed like his last year, it was just like way too many risks. And you got to wonder, like, is he like an offensive genius to where he just gets bored and he's like tired of calling the same plays or whatever. And it's like, I've been on this team forever. And you wonder, like, if he's going to fall into that same type of rut with this Jacksonville team. Well, I mean, right now, let's just say he's in the prime of his career. Being the head coach with this team, still relatively new, still relatively young, and I just worry like where they are at in like 2 years, 3 years. If he kind of starts taking those unnecessary chances, because that was one of the biggest knocks I think on him. Like a lot of like crazy fourth down tries, just like things that like most normal coaches don't do. I think like he was just a little bit bored, but clearly he's got this team going in the right direction, and he's obviously developed Trevor Lawrence to be one of the better quarterbacks. I mean, this is probably one of the guys that a lot of the fantasy gurus are talking about, saying like he's going to have a big year, and I agree with that. I think he's going to have, arguably, this might be one of his best seasons of his career. But now you bring in Calvin Ridley, who's a legit deep threat. um, this offense looks like it could be tough to go ahead and slow it down. The only concern I have, Uncle Dave, is you were talking about the offensive line. They got a player that's suspended, a player that's going to be out. If they can go ahead and go get those guys back eventually, I think that this offensive line can go ahead and get a little bit better, and this could be one of the more dangerous offenses in the league. I'm not super high on the defense there, Uncle Dave. I don't know how you feel about it. I don't think that the pass rush is very good. Secondary also has some question marks, but I think it's decent enough. The pass rush and the secondary to probably keep them in these games all season long. The one thing that makes me think that this could potentially be a better defense this year than it was last year, and maybe even a surprising defense, is because there was a lot of players on this defense that were relatively young. You got players in year 3, year 4 now coming in. Sometimes defensive guys, or really any NFL player, it takes them like 2, 3, 4 years before they really get it down and they start to develop into a quality starter that can go ahead and play in this league for years to come. I think that might be the case here with the Jaguars, because their defense wasn't all that great last year. But if they can grow in quality NFL starting players, this could be one of the more surprising defenses that a lot of people didn't see coming. So, don't know how you feel about the defense there, Uncle Dave. I'm kind of I don't want to say I'm on the fence with them, but I think that that's probably the safe place for me to be. Um, I think there's a lot of optimism. I don't think they can go backwards. I will say that. I think they could surprise. I think that's the easiest way for me to say it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. A little bit more on it in a second, but I want to go back to Trevor Lawrence. Which I was thinking of when you mentioned second and third year. He's in his third year of his rookie contract. It would behoove him to have an above average or better than last year season because he's gonna break the bank. So they don't talk about it, but you have to know that. And defensively, I agree with you to a point to where they know they have to improve their pass rush. But what I do have a little bit of faith in is Mike Caldwell, the defensive coordinator. He's won a Super Bowl with the Bucks, so he knows how to get it done. But he's got three number one draft picks at linebacker, and none of them older than 27. And I think with Josh Allen and Lloyd and Walker, I think they have arguably one of the deepest and probably most versatile linebacking groups in the league. And this is uh, Caldwell's. Uh, last year he took a team that finished 24th in points per game the year prior to 14th in points per game last year. So if they upgrade their pass rush, they could be a top 10 defense. I mean, I'm kind of like you. I'm not gonna underscore it and sign it, but the upside is certainly there, and I so agree with you that they aren't going to go backwards. So yeah, I think the only way to go there is up, and I think they do go up. I think they do get into the top 10 in points allowed. So I'm totally with you on that. I just think I think their linebacker core is elite. The question mark is the pass rush in the back end, but we'll have to wait and see. Okay, if they had a pass rush in the back end, I probably would be betting them to win the Super Bowl.
Well, I mean, maybe that was one of the situations that they kind of found themselves in last year was that they had to go ahead and go out there and play as like a bend and breakdown defense. Maybe they didn't want to utilize their pass rush so much because their secondary and linebacker core wasn't exactly developed or up to snuff on everything they needed to be. So maybe they were dropping more guys in coverage. I don't know. I haven't looked at their blitz rate, but my guess is that maybe it was one of the lower blitzing teams in the league, and maybe this year maybe they have everything that they need in place and they could turn it up a little bit. So maybe all the stats and numbers aren't exactly true. And to be honest with you, none of that stuff is truthful. I mean, 30% of the stats are actually correct, as Elon Musk would say. But yeah, I don't know. I think this could be one of the surprising defenses, and we're going to find out here shortly. So Uncle Dave and I like the Jaguars over the 9.5. Um, Let me get a final prediction from you there, Uncle Dave, on where you think this Jaguars team ends up at the end of the year.
I think it's a given. A given. I mean, it's betting. Nothing's a given. I think it's close to a given that they win that division. And honestly, if they can get home field, I think the sky's the limit. We're only asking them to win one more game than they did last year to cash this ticket. So I feel good about that. I feel good about them winning the division. And if they get uh, a couple more wins than we might think, to potentially get home field or at least home field until the AFC Championship game. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that they get home field throughout. I mean, the Bills, they've got some issues they're talking about up there, and the Jets are better. Obviously, I mean, I like their chances, and Miami's decent. We don't know what New England's going to do, so with both Buffalo and the Jets in the AFC East, is there going to be a 13 win team there? That's going to be tough. And the same thing can be said about Kansas City. A lot of people like their under. People think the Broncos are going to be better. People think the Raiders are not. People think the Chargers are going to beat some teams. So Kansas City winning 13 games is not a given. And of course, I don't think anybody in the AFC North will win that. So it's conceivable the Jaguars could get home field throughout. But if they get it at least through the first and second rounds, or maybe they get a bye, they could make the AFC Championship game. I would not. That's not out of the question.
They can certainly win this division. Right now, their division odds are minus 155. Now, the second team will be the Tennessee Titans at like plus 120. But let me go back to the schedule here and tell you why I think the minus 155 is a wager that you want to make right now. The Tennessee Titans are going to start out the year on the road against the Saints. They can easily lose that game. Their next game is going to be against the Chargers. Then they have to play Cleveland and Cincinnati, in Cleveland and at home against Cincinnati. They could legitimately go 0 for 4, the Tennessee Titans. Or let's just say they win one game, but let's say that the Jaguars go out and they're 3-1, and it's, let's say Jags are 3-1, Tennessee Titans are 1-3. The Jaguars now become like minus 280, minus 290, almost minus 300 to win this division. So let's just take the second team and be like, okay, they have a little bit of a rough stretch here to go ahead and start out the year. You want to go ahead and you want to buy the Jaguars now, I think at minus 155. So that would be a wager that I would recommend there. I don't know if you took a look at the Tennessee schedule there, Uncle Dave, but I think that's probably, a wager that the better should consider.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to go a little deeper into their schedule, once they get through with that, they've got a probable win game at the Colts, but then Lamar Jackson and the Ravens come to Tennessee. They probably will beat the Falcons at home, but then they got 2 road games against Pittsburgh, who I think is going to be okay, and against Tampa Bay, and I think Tampa Bay is going to be a lot better than people think this year. And then, of course, they play the Jaguars. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know if Tennessee's going to be a 500 team, with or without DeAndre Hopkins, although, they were 500 last year with Tannehill, and I think 1-4 without, something along those lines. But, I don't know that a wide receiver is going to put them over the top to be a 10 or an 11 win team. So I'm with you. I think if you take that minus $1.50 or minus 155 now, you'll probably have some good equity in that come late October.
All right, well, there's an extra bet for you guys for this one there. But as I said, Uncle Dave and I are going to go ahead and look at the Jaguars over the 9.5 wins, and also going ahead recommending playing the Jaguars to win their division at minus 155. You guys know where to find Uncle Dave and I on Twitter at SleepyJ_pregame, at Dave_Essler. Make sure you guys like, subscribe to the podcast. If you have not been to pregame.com yet, make sure you go over there to pregame.com. If you guys are looking for a free pick, enter pregame25, get yourself a free pick. With that said, I'd like to wish you guys all the best of luck. Enjoy the games.
All right. Let's go on to our next pick. AJ Hoffman.
I made a last minute
Which of my picks are you?
change.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, dear.
I'm going Houston Texans under 6.5. And kind of the opposite of Scott, where it's gone from perfect, where the market's gone.
That's me, baby.
It's gone down, 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 and now Scott's buying low. I've waited for the market to go up, up, up. The market's bullish on the Texans.
Why did you think it was going up?
I think the market's bullish on the new coach, which they should be. But to go from 7 wins in the last 2 seasons to having to win 7 games this season, I think it's too much of a jump for a franchise that's had massive turnover year over year. And a rookie quarterback with no wide receiving options. The best wide receiver they traded out, Brandon Cooks. So now Robert Woods is a number 1 wide receiver. I mean, they're not setting C.J. Stroud up for success. DeMeco Ryans, I do think, is going to have success long term, but I don't think it's instantaneous. So, and I think to jump them up to 7 wins this season is too much of an ask.
I think this is a good pick. I like this.
Defense. There's people saying top 10 defense.
Possibly.
So, I mean, when you look, I mean, you're more familiar with this team. I know there's been a lot of turnover. When you look at the defense, how optimistic are you? And last year, let's look at the Football Outsiders. I think their D was pretty good last year.
I'll check that. I'll check their DVOA, but the defense is on the rise, certainly. But they're all young. Yep. They're all first, second, third year guys. Which
that means you get better.
Sure.
You
but
know, the rule of 1, if I take the season win up and down 1, it makes this look like a really good pick, I think. Because if you told me Houston's season win number was 5.5, I'd be like, I'm okay with that. Doesn't seem.
And that's what it opened at, was 5.5.
Doesn't seem that crazy. But if you told me it was 7.5, it's like, you're out of your effing mind. This is an 8-9 team?
Well, here's the question, though. What was Jacksonville's win? I mean, Jacksonville had the number 1 pick 2 years in a row. Then they made the playoffs. These rebuilds in the NFL don't take a long. It's not like the NBA. It's a 4-year. And now Houston's dragged it out in a weird way.
Jacksonville was 6.6 was their season win last year.
That was the close?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean,
that makes your point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
But that wasn't Trevor Lawrence's rookie year.
Well, after Trevor, the optimism on Trevor Lawrence after year 1 was a lot lower than it was entering year 1.
Sure.
So, I mean, in general, it was like a worse than a rookie or worse than Trevor Lawrence. All I know is this. Houston's going to do anything they need to, no matter steal, beg, borrow, lawyers, guns, and money. They're not going to give the 2nd pick or the 3rd pick to Arizona.
Yeah.
That will be a literally clear the house of everyone that was involved in that pick. It's time for you to go home. And
after 1 year on the job,
whatever. I mean, I don't. What I hear is there was real consternation, and it was like a negotiated peace. hey, because here's the thing about D'Amico Ryans. He's running the San Francisco defense, which is it's a version, if I'm not mistaken, of this, the cover, what was it, the Tampa 3 or the Tampa 2. It's more of a takeoff of the Seattle defense, in which you got to have good D linemen. I mean, look at the 49ers, right? They spent all their money on the D line on defense, or not all, but they got a great middle linebacker. But the point is, you need to have that line. He said, this is my guy on the line. And they made a crazy trade to get that second pick after Stroud, or the second pick, third pick overall after Stroud. But I think if it gets to be late and they're thinking, okay, we got 4 wins, let's say, and there's, 3 games left, they're going to be playing so hard when pump up the end of the season. I hope they play some tanking. Like, if they play 1 or 2 tanking
They
teams.
play Tennessee twice in week 15 and 17.
Ooh, Tennessee. Now, I'm always Vrabel, more optimistic.
Then
But
at Indy week 18.
okay, that's interesting because Indy's going to get better, I think, as the year goes on. But that's not a hard. Let's look at this schedule. Oh, they got Arizona. Oh, that's going to be an interesting game.
Yeah. A lot on the line.
You take the ball. Take the ball.
Those seem a lot easier than what Kansas City has to play.
Yeah, let's look at this. Baltimore's a tough one. Indianapolis early. I like that. Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Atlanta. Boy, that's interesting. New Orleans, Carolina, Tampa.
They play all the NFC South games in a row.
Cincy's a tough game. Arizona, Jacksonville, Denver, Jets, Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee, Indiana. This is the easiest schedule I've ever seen. Like, you're right, Fez. How many games do they have with one of the bottom 5 teams? And Kansas City has none, right? So
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy.
And they get the bottom teams twice, like in Indy. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You know what? Let's correlate this to our long shots. Houston to win the division.
Then again, Indy right now, when we analyze his Indy schedule, we're like, well, they get Houston twice.
No, it's true, but the theory is if you only need to win 7 games, this is 7 of 17. Right? You can lose 10 of them. Now I hear you. Listen, I like it a lot more at 5.5, no doubt.
Right.
And I think you're doing a good job. I'm coming in late because there's no VIG. I wouldn't want to lay the VIG on this, but I hear people talking about division. Like, seriously. I'm hearing people talking about Indianapolis. Jacksonville's overrated.
I agree with that.
Yes.
And I think they just lost.
I still think they're the best team in the division, but I think
for
they're
sure.
overrated.
I think if you did nothing but fade rookie quarterbacks their first year, it's close, but you wind up winning if you play unders.
Fez, we know you're going to say play under no matter what. Even if they pound balls, you want them to play. You play under. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Seems to be a theme. Yeah.
I mean, but in general, here's the division. Now, this is interesting. Look at the respect the Colts are getting. Wouldn't you have said the Colts and the Texans were in the same kind of category entering the year?
No, I think Anthony Richardson's a wild card.
I think he might have a higher basement than people
Yes, and I think
And it's funny because we're talking about one team having an Ohio State quarterback in C.J. Stroud, the other one having Anthony Richardson, who I think could be similar to Justin Fields in that even if everything else is a disaster, he can just run away with the football and make something happen. Mm-hmm. I think that's a benefit. While he grows, I don't know if that helps anything for his long term, but I think in the short term he can cover up being terrible by running the football.
Well, the theory, and this is serious research, like this is what the sharpest people believe. If you don't have the ability to run, it's very hard to come into the NFL with the Tom Brady-esque pocket ability fully formed, that you're going to have a learning curve inevitably, and the only way to overcome that is by running the first 2 years.
How'd Purdy do it?
Again, this is the Shanahan love. Is that, how did I'm having a mental block. Who was the guy that he had the most yards after 100?
Nick Mullins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then, I don't know. I mean, I've never seen Shanahan's offense actually. I mean, I guess you could say Atlanta and Matt Ryan had one of the best years in 16, the last 10.
Yeah, but he was touted as being, so NFL ready.
Who are we talking about?
Matt Ryan, when you're talking
No, he wasn't a rookie. We're talking about Shanahan's ability to rise up mediocre quarterbacks,
Oh,
but does it cause a B quarterback to become an A? I think the Matt Ryan year is the 1 year I mean, Schaub was pretty deep. I mean, again, he wasn't the coordinator in Houston, was he, or was he?
He became the coordinator, but he started out as a quarterback's
Yeah,
coach.
so I mean, he's got a long history of bringing guys up. We just haven't seen Shanahan bring a guy to elite at least more than the 1 year. Because if I'm not mistaken, Shanahan was there in 15, and Matt Ryan struggled. I remember Malinsky was really down on Atlanta in 16 because he said Matt Ryan's getting older, and Shanahan there needs to be movement in the quarterback. That was the assumption at the time in that offense, and they didn't think Matt Ryan was ready for that. He was getting too old for it. But in 16, he was amazing. Yeah. That was a Super Bowl year. Was Kyle there in 15?
Yeah, they went 8-8 as his first year in Atlanta. Yeah.
Yeah. But, a quarterback, wins are not an offensive coordinator stat.
But Super Bowl losses are.
Well, no. I mean, I've never said that.
But that's also another thing that I sort of dislike about the Texans this season is C.J. Stroud's not a runner. So being forced to be a passing quarterback with poor wide receivers, it makes me feel like it's going to be a bigger learning curve for a guy like C.J. Stroud, but at least early.
But processing, he's much more ready than
no doubt.
So, I mean, Mac Jones in theory was super ready, though he's not a runner. He had one of the best rookie years of the last 10 years. He just did.
Yep.
Now his second year was horrible. Now what happens, right? This is interesting. Would you agree, Fez, you're hearing a lot of positive things about Houston?
Oh, absolutely. And that's reflected in the greater market.
I think you're right. And
I've heard guys I respect throw out they can win the division. Yeah.
Part of it is I just don't want AJ's, would you say, toxic disdain for all the Houston teams?
At least. There's a reason he's barred for life.
By the way, the Texans' offensive coordinator has been under Shanahan for the past several years. He was the passing game coordinator in San Francisco.
Boy, they're digging deep to get guys right.
I want to ask you, all of you guys, we never talk about this. So you get a quarterback that obviously won all his games in high school, extremely successful in college, and now all of a sudden
Josh Allen.
And now, that's true, with Wyoming. And then then he shows up, and instead of winning, going 9-1, you blink and he's 2-7, and that's got to be a culture change or a shock almost.
Well, that's what Trevor Lawrence went through. Remember, Trevor Lawrence didn't lose football games, and then he got to the NFL and he lost every one.
I think he's going to have a hell of a year this year. That's my prediction.
Hey guys, Sleepy J here, pregame.com, back with another NFL team preview for 2023 season. Uncle Dave with me here. You guys know where to find Uncle Dave on Twitter at Dave_Essler. And of course, right here at pregame.com. Team we're going to go ahead and preview today, Tennessee Titans. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at their season win total of 7.5 wins. Uncle Dave, I'm going to start out here with Tennessee. And I want to talk a little bit about the schedule with this team. The Titans' schedule, it is not easy this year. It's kind of weird, too, when you look at this division. Because right now the Titans, they have like the 26th hardest schedule in the league. And the Colts, who are in the same division, arguably have one of the easiest schedules in the league. So I don't think that the schedule makers did any favors for this Titans team whatsoever. They're going to have to play the Bengals. They have to play the Chargers, the Ravens, Miami, Seattle, Jaguars twice, at the Saints, at the Browns, 3 games in a row. They're going to have to play on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Bucks, the Jags. It's not easy. I don't see a lot of easy wins for this Tennessee team. I could see a few. They're going to end up getting Indy, and they'll get the Texans twice each, obviously. I mean, they could probably beat those teams, and maybe they can sweep them. And there are a couple other wins out there, maybe against the Panthers and the Bucks. Falcons are going to play them at home. But needing 8 wins, it honestly looks tough. And they're going to have to go ahead. They're going to have to win on the road. And they're going to have to beat good teams in tough spots. 8 wins seems it just seems very tough to me. They're going to play in 2 primetime games. Both of those primetime games are going to be on the road at Pittsburgh and at Miami. That kind of sucks. And then one of their home games gets screwed out of them because they're going to have to play Baltimore. It's not at home. It's in England. So there's a home game out the window. Schedule-wise, not easy for Tennessee. I don't know how the Colts got away with 4th easiest schedule in the league or one of the easiest, and then this team gets hit with this type of schedule. It's just not easy. So for me to go ahead and find 8 wins, I cannot go out here and say that this Titans team is going to win 8 just based on their schedule. Now we could talk about the rosters, but Uncle Dave, when you look at this schedule, do you see the same amount of roadblocks that I do? Because it just doesn't look easy right now on paper.
Yeah, I do, and you mentioned it, a lot of it. But I'm admittedly leery of taking the under. I'm not going to take the over, but let's look at the other side of the coin because last year they were a 500 team when Tannehill played, and now is the over the trendy pick. Yes, they added Hopkins, but let's not overreact, and that didn't change their win total. And Jacksonville's the class of the division. The Colts can't be any worse, and even if Stroud isn't ready, Mills isn't the worst quarterback in the NFL, and so then okay, maybe they bet the over, but if they sniff this total, I think it's because of Mike Vrabel and Mike Vrabel alone. I mean, I looked at their schedule too sleepy, and they likely lose week 1 at the Saints. They could start 0-2 the following week against the Chargers, or at worst, that's not a write-in game. Then they're at the Browns and at home to the Bengals, who might have Burrow back by then. So there is an 0-4 scenario there, and not too long thereafter they host the Ravens, and they're, as you mentioned, they're at both Pittsburgh and at Tampa. And I may be in the minority of people who think the Bucks will be probably better than people are penciling them in to be. And the second half of their schedule, I think it does get easier, but they do travel to South Florida, and they obviously play Jacksonville on the road. I mean, I think they're a 500 team at best, and that's if things played out absolutely perfectly, which I would never bet on happening. So I'm with you in terms of, is the talent there? Is the coaching there? Yes, but that schedule. It's a tough one, and if they start poorly, I don't know how many more cats Mike Vrabel can pull out of a hat. So, yeah, the schedule is definitely not favorable.
All right, well, let's see if they have the offense to go ahead and maybe overachieve a little bit and not have to worry so much about the tough schedule that they have. I think the Titans' offense is pretty much like eh. I mean, they do have Henry back there. I mean, we know that he's a monster. He's always been elite, and I think he'll probably finish out his career very similar to like an Adrian Peterson, where he ran hard for 10 years, and everybody knew that this dude was like really really good. So I don't want to knock him yet, but a guy gets a lot of touches, so you just have to wonder, when you're coming in on a team that doesn't probably have Super Bowl aspirations, if he's going to be like full go for the entire season. They do bring in DeAndre Hopkins, and I think that if he could be himself and get back to being DeAndre Hopkins, I think this offense could actually be decent. And I like the fact that it's just Tannehill in there. They know what they have with him. They know what he can do. He's not going to be a playoff winning quarterback really ever in his career. Could he win one game? Sure, but he's not going to He's not going to lead this team to the Super Bowl. I think that that's fair to say. I do like the tight end that they brought in Okonkwo. I think that he's going to add a little bit more of a passing element to this team. But here's my issue. It's the offensive line. I think they're well below average. Wide receiver core, Uncle Dave, right now, it's already banged up. Now, Burks got carted off here in training camp, and they really haven't said a whole lot about that right now. I think the depth for this offense behind every position is absolutely terrible. And I think we saw that last year because the injury bug kind of hit this team a little bit. Not really at the running back position, but we saw the quarterback go down. We saw multiple wide receivers go down, and they really didn't have much to offer on a weekly basis. And it seems to me like the depth really didn't get fixed at all. And they're already having some issues right now. So that worries me. If there's an injury to maybe Henry or an injury to Tannehill or DeAndre Hopkins goes down, they just don't have guys to fill in those type of holes. And if they end up with a rash of injuries, this offense could be in real trouble. So I'm not really in love with this offense at all. I don't want to sell them and I don't want to buy them right now. I guess this offense to me, it feels similar to maybe a Panthers offense when they had McCaffrey, or maybe a Giants offense when they had Barkley and they really just didn't have much else. It was just a typical type of 8-8 team where everything ran through the running back. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. That's kind of how I feel right now with this Tennessee offense. I think there's potential there, but the ceiling doesn't seem too high. But an injury or two, and the floor could be, it could be in the absolute basement for this team. So That's kind of how I'm looking at the offense right now. Hopefully, hopefully it's competitive and this isn't just one of those dead teams. But I don't know. I just honestly don't know how they get to 8 wins right now with this offense and this schedule. And we could talk about the defense here in a minute. But how are you feeling about this Titans offense right now?
Yeah, very similarly, Sleepy. I'll try to summarize. You touched on some of it there, but yeah, okay, Hopkins. Let's talk about the elephant in the room first. Well, he had some monster seasons with the Texans, and then he didn't. In 2 years with Arizona, he only played in 19 games, and now with a 17-game schedule, that's barely over a season. So, who's to say he isn't living off what he did and not what he's doing now? I mean, I think he opens things up a little bit for Treylon Burks, but you mentioned it. He just had an LCL injury, and he'll be out a few weeks, and he missed 6 games last season. So, as I said when we were talking about their schedule, Tannehill. He's a 500 quarterback, and they're a 500 team. So if he's on the field, they're a 500 team. I mean, Tannehill, smoke and mirrors has got to end too. He's only averaged a little over 200 yards a game over the last 2 years, and in my opinion, he's still not much more than a game manager. He's not the guy that's going to lead comeback wins or drive the team 95 yards downfield when they need to. I don't think. And then of course there's Derrick Henry, and yes, he's a beast, but I think he's got nowhere to go but down. I would call him an aging running back. Remember he missed half the year in 2021, and before he went out, he was on pace for over 400 carries that year, and I think he's had 350 or more 2 of the other 3 seasons since 2019. I mean, that's a ton of wear and tear. I don't care if you're Derrick Henry or not. So, I think the bottom line to that offense is like their schedule, Sleepy. I think it has to go perfect with no injuries, especially in the backfield. And Hopkins, I think he has to be the one we saw with the Texans 3 years ago. And I don't see the stars aligning perfectly. So I'm, as we talked about earlier, when Hopkins came over, not a lot of teams were jumping to get him. And when he did sign with Houston, it didn't really move the needle, maybe the vig a little bit on their win total. So, that may, I mean, it's an issue in the media more than it is on the field. So, yeah, I don't see it with that offense, Sleepy.
All right. Well, I guess we're kind of both on the same page there. So let's talk defense here now, Uncle Dave. I'm kind of up in the air with this defense a little bit. I think that each group kind of has their own kind of particular rating. I think the defensive line's good, but they don't exactly get after the pass rush, so they could stop the run. I think the safeties could actually be some of the best in the league, but I think the corners are actually a little bit of a liability. Linebacking core could be a little bit of an issue. Like this team kind of seems like they have a lot of ups and downs on the defensive side of the ball. My issue with this defense is that the schedule isn't easy. And when you're playing quarterbacks out there, face Herbert, Watson, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Lawrence twice, you got to face Tua and Tyreek Hill, Seattle, and that bunch. It just seems like every week, like they're going to have to try to hold down some type of, world beating quarterback or some dynamic duo out there, in the passing attack. It worries me. So I don't know where the confidence comes from. I don't know where they build, around this defense and say, you know what, let's really rely on this, because I don't think they're really super, super strong anywhere outside of the safety position. So I don't know what to really rate this defense right now. I have them like 22nd in the league, but I think they could be maybe as high as 15. I don't feel like they could really be any lower because there are some pretty bad defenses right now in the NFL. But it's not a defense that I can rely on, honest to God, to get us to 8 wins. That's kind of where I'm at with the defense right now. I guess it's kind of iffy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I mean, I look back at last year, and they only allowed 21 points per game, which is super respectable and in the top third of the league. And that was playing the Colts, though, and Texans 4 times, which is almost a quarter of their schedule. And they also played Washington and the Broncos. And then it's like I looked and I expected to see bad numbers against good teams, good offenses anyway, and they weren't there. They weren't awful. But I think this defense lacks playmakers, and it's a defense that I don't think can actually win games. Create turnovers, score, that type of thing. And I guess I go back to the beginning, which is a great way to close. I think if it weren't for Vrabel, that collection of talent that they have, I think it would be in the bottom third on defense. And I think eventually those lines cross. I mean, for the talent that Tennessee has had since Vrabel's been there, which I don't think is good. I think he should probably get Coach of the Year every year. So if they're going to be, I don't think I'm totally with you. I don't think they're going to be anything more than middle of the road, and I don't think they're going to be a huge liability. But I don't think they're going to be a Dallas defense or something that could actually step up and win a game for you when the offense is struggling. So again, my summary on the Titans is if everything goes perfect, they could go over. But as we know, rarely does a season ever go perfect regarding injuries, travel, weather, all that other stuff that you need to have go your way to be a playoff team. I don't see that happening in my world.
All right. I think you summarized kind of what I was wanting to say there, Uncle Dave, pretty clearly. I'm with you. I like this defense. They don't have that. They don't have that Bosa or that Watt or let's just say like a Sauce Gardner. Like they don't have those guys on this team. Guys that are going to go out there, make plays, and change the game on the dime. But you're right. They don't have those defensive type of playmakers. Here's the wager that I do want to make here, Uncle Dave. I get it like it's 7.5, but this is a wager that I really want to make because I cannot find 9 wins on this schedule. Like Uncle Dave said, like it's not like everything has to go right, but in order for them to go ahead and get to 8 wins, a lot has to go right. And when you're looking at a lot has to go right, you're hoping that chemistry works well. You're hoping that running backs, still have that tread in the tire, that this new wide receiver that they brought in, DeAndre Hopkins, can at least just fit in the offense. And you're really hoping and praying that injuries don't hit this team. That's a lot of hope. And to get to 9 wins, I don't see, even if those things all go well, how they get there because I can't find 9 wins on this schedule. And if you go to DraftKings right now, and this is an alternate bet, I'm making this bet. I'm going to go and I'm going to play under 8.5 wins at minus 180. I feel very good. I think that bet makes a lot of sense. I just do not see this team getting to 9 wins. I think 8 is kind of their pinnacle. And the reason I say that is because the AFC is absolutely stacked. You look at the NFC, you might be able to pick 3, 4 good teams out of the NFC. But if you look at the AFC right now, I'm just talking at least 500 or better teams or just playoff teams. There's a whole bunch of teams out there right now in the AFC. So it's going to be tough for Tennessee to go ahead, navigate through this schedule with this roster to get to 9 games. I just don't see that. So I see a very good bet here on DraftKings, or FanDuel actually has this one too, under 8.5 wins minus 180. That's the wager that I would recommend here right now with the Titans. Not sure if you like that one there, Uncle Dave, but I think this is one of those times where we could lay a little bit of juice and pick up. I feel like this game is just worth so much.
I'm going to pull a Simon Cowell here, Sleepy. I don't like that bet. I love that bet. I think that's a great move to buy that under. But I think that juice, what you're paying, adds more value than what you'd get without it. So yeah, I'm all about that. And obviously, well, not obviously, but I hadn't really considered that bet. And once you said it, I went, well, duh. I'm a dumbass for not thinking about it. Yeah, I'm in 100% total agreement, and I think I'll just follow you down that rabbit hole.
You know what I think, Uncle Dave, is that you and I were probably feeling the same way about Tennessee. Like if they're going to get over this 7.5, they're going to just squeak over. But in order for them to get over 8.5, they're going to have to get shot out of a can and catapulted. Like that's the kind of like difference that we feel with these particular type of numbers between 7.5 and 8.5. Like, I could see them winning 8 games, but I think they're going to squeak that out. And for them to get that extra win, like they're gonna have to be something special, and obviously, I don't see it. It doesn't sound like Uncle Dave sees that either. So that'll wrap up the Tennessee Titans. So we're looking at the unders, but the wager that I recommend personally for myself, FanDuel DraftKings under 8.5 minus 180 for the Tennessee Titans. Make sure you guys go ahead and continue to follow right here at pregame.com. We have all our NFL previews up on the site, whether you go to the forum, whether you go to our video page. There are tons of NFL previews for you. Make sure you guys keep checking back right here at pregame.com. Hey guys, SleepyJ pregame.com. Going to go ahead and continue our NFL team previews. Got Uncle Dave with me here today. You guys know where to find Uncle Dave on Twitter at Dave_Essler. You guys could always get us right here at pregame.com. Team we're going to go ahead and preview today, the Indianapolis Colts. Myself and Uncle Dave will go ahead. We'll let you guys know what we think when it comes to a season win total, whether we want to go ahead and bet them over or under, or if we're going to go ahead and pass. Now, this Indianapolis Colts team, they do have some question marks currently right now. Jonathan Taylor looks like he will not be on this team when this team kicks off for week one. At least that's kind of what many of us are thinking right now as he requested a trade. And the Colts also have a new rookie quarterback in Anthony Richardson. So there's a lot of questions for us to go ahead and ask here and kind of consider. Uncle Dave, I do want to start out here with the schedule. I'm going to let you go ahead and rip and run first with how you're looking at this schedule. I'm looking at it a couple different ways. Here's what I will say. I think the Indianapolis Colts could potentially have the easiest schedule to maybe a top 5 easiest schedule. So when I look at them right now from the gate, I think their schedule is very easy. And all my notes here that I have here, I'll explain a little bit in depth. But I'm going to let you go and get a first crack here with what you see at this Colts schedule. If you see any roadblocks, if you see any things that actually might help propel them over to 6.5 win total.
Well, I don't think they're going to win 6.5 games. And, I didn't go game by game. I'm kind of looking at the Colts as an organization. And, the beginning of the schedule, they open up against Jacksonville. You have to figure that's a loss. Then they got road games at Houston. That's a losable game. At Baltimore, that's a losable game. So they could be 0-3. And, I don't know that they ever recover from that, no matter who they play. But, coming into last season, they were favorites to win the AFC South. And what happens, they end up firing Frank Reich, give the interim job to Jeff Saturday. I mean, as an organization, I think they've been in need of an overhaul since Peyton Manning left. I think they've been sort of what I call just good enough to not implode the team, but not bad enough to implode the team. I think until now, and they got an owner, Jim Irsay. I mean, he's second only to Jerry Jones in terms of garnering publicity, and that's not a good thing. I think teams that live like that don't succeed. Teams with owners that hire the right people and let them do their jobs do. So I'm going to go ahead and say they start poorly and they're poorly managed, so they end poorly. And I almost don't care who they play, to be honest with you, Sleepy.
So for me, Uncle Dave, I kind of see maybe a couple early losses here. I see a lot of below average type teams that don't actually have a whole hell of a lot going for them. Playoff potential teams that they might face this year. I said the Bengals, Baltimore, Jacksonville. Obviously, now they have to play them twice. Maybe the Browns. But here are the potential teams that they can beat. The Texans twice, the Rams, the Titans twice, the Saints, the Panthers, the Bucks, Patriots, Falcons, Steelers, Raiders. That's not exactly a tough schedule. Right now, Vegas has the Colts with the 5th easiest schedule. I think that you can make a case that they might have the easiest schedule in the entire league. Now, they will end up with a home game here, but it's going to be in Frankfurt against the Patriots, and that's going into the bye. Both of those teams are going to be going into the bye, so that's a little bit iffy. But they will lose a home game there, and they don't have any primetime games at all. And I think that actually could be a good thing because a team like this, I don't know if you want to put them under the spotlight. I think the schedule actually provides plenty of opportunities for wins, and you have to consider that they do have streaks during the season where they can go on some runs where it would be, maybe against Carolina, New England, Tampa Bay, Tennessee. They have 4 games in a row that they can rattle off wins at the end of the year. They play the Falcons, Raiders, and Texans. I think they can rip off a little bit maybe of a run there. Maybe in the beginning of the year, too, there's a couple little spots there that they could rip off, like maybe 1 or 2 games. So I guess I can say that they're not going to go on any major skids, like, probably like 0 for 5 or 0 for 6. I don't think we'll see any of those. But I do think we can see some short winning streaks here with them. And this number being at 6.5, I think the schedule is actually favorable for them. Now, like I said with the offense there, Uncle Dave, it's probably going to be tough. You're not going to have Jonathan Taylor back there. As I said, he wants to go ahead and he wants to get traded. He's not committed to this team whatsoever. So now that Jonathan Taylor is not going to be committed to this team, I guess you kind of have to hope in a sense that Anthony Richardson turns into maybe like a top 10 quarterback right away. And that's not going to be easy with the skill guys that he has out there. I mean, this is kind of a really young team. I think outside of the third wide receiver and Isaiah McKenzie, the skill guys really don't have more than like 2, 3, 4 years experience at best. So this is going to be a very young team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. and it's going to be led by a rookie, and typically that's not a good thing. The offensive line I kind of like here, Uncle Dave. I think it's probably a little bit above average. I would say probably closer to top 10. I think that could provide maybe a little bit of comfort for the passing attack and the rushing attack. The Colts are going to face a lot of poor offenses this entire season, but they will play some good defenses. So this team has to score points, and I think that's going to be kind of the name of the game for them. If they can go out there and they can score points, they can hang in some games. But if they can't score points, they're going to get blown out in a lot of games because some of the defenses that they're playing are very good. I think looking at Colts unders each and every week until the market adjusts, I think that that's probably a way to look here. So I would maybe go ahead and start looking at those game of the year line odds now if they're up and you have some totals for these indie games. Maybe look at going ahead playing their totals under, and it's not just necessarily their team total; it would be the game total as well. So I think this Colts offense is going to be it's going to be a work in progress there, Uncle Dave. And I'm just not necessarily sure that I'm bought in with the rookie quarterback with a very young, inexperienced type of offense really getting it going. But I do think that there are some teams on the schedule that aren't going to intimidate this offense so much that they can, go out there and try their best and not, hang their head so much. So that's kind of how I feel about the offense right now. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I look at, we're talking about win totals, and I agree with a couple things you said. Colts unders, maybe. I guess we'll talk about their defense in a little bit, but um, if I look at the win total, they're asking the Colts to win three more games than they did last year with a rookie quarterback. And, Luck won 11 games in his rookie year, but Anthony Richardson isn't Luck, and nor does he have Reggie Wayne. He's got Isaiah McKenzie, as you mentioned, Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, and obviously probably not Taylor. And, Richardson has the physical tools, there's no doubt. He has combine skills, if you will, that a lot of kids don't have. But he only started 13 games at Florida, so and I watch a lot of him living in Florida at Gainesville, and I didn't get all the hype. Now, having said that, I didn't get all the hype when Stephon Gilmore came out of South Carolina and was drafted as highly as he was, and I was wrong. So I could be wrong, and I agree with you about the offensive line being above average. You look at they allowed the second most sacks last year, only ahead of Denver, and some of those sacks were on Matt Ryan for sure. The thing about I like the Colts' future being beyond this year. I mean, they've got a rookie head coach who's clearly brought in to develop Richardson. I mean, Steichen was the OC for the Eagles for 2 years and had 1 year with the Chargers. And look back in Philly, he had Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown. And obviously in L.A., he had Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen. And, he doesn't have those pieces right now. So I'm cautiously pessimistic about that offense at this point. It's not to say that they won't, but I don't think that they will early. So that sort of lends some credibility to your thoughts about Colts unders. But having said that, it lends credibility to my thinking they may not win 6.5 games. I think Tennessee will be okay in that division. I don't think they move the needle a whole lot with signing DeAndre Hopkins, but they're a 500 team or better with Tannehill, and Jacksonville's we know is good, and we don't know what Stroud's going to do in Houston, but they pretty much got nowhere to go but up. So yeah, I like the pieces they have. I just don't think they're all going to fit together in 2023.
I'm with you with that, Uncle Dave. It's a work in progress, right? It kind of feels like this. I don't want to say it's a full rebuild, but now you have a rookie quarterback, so the rebuild always starts with that position, and then you lose arguably one of the better running backs in the league. So it feels like it's almost like a rebuild, but they've have pieces there that hopefully they'll work together. I mean, we'll find out at least on the offensive side. The defensive side of the ball, I kind of don't mind the Colts defense. I think they have a very good defensive line and linebacking core. I think they're going to be okay in those areas, but it is the secondary. That's kind of what worries me. Another year in the system with those young guys, I guess against some of these bad offenses, like the offenses, like I said, they're not going to have to play a lot of quarterbacks that are really scary. They're going to have 7 games this year versus either a rookie quarterback or a quarterback that's been shipped to a new team. And that's not counting Mac Jones. That's not counting Tannehill. That's not counting Pickett. So it's not like they have to play a lot of world beater quarterbacks this year. I mean, they're going to have to play Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, just to name a few. But outside of that, and Trevor Lawrence, outside of like those four quarterbacks, I mean, it's a manageable schedule when their defense is looking at, the quarterback that's going to be on the opposite side of the field. So I'm looking for the defense to kind of at least just keep them in games each and every week. I don't see anything that really pops off the paper in a negative or positive way. Um, let's just say an average defense, their Uncle Dave, and I think they'll be on kind of like a week to week basis on whether they're good or whether they're bad. But I figure maybe average is kind of about right with that defense. What do you think?
I'm saying average at best. All we can really do is look at history. And I want to go back to something you said, and we may talk about it in some of our other previews about, schedules and down the road and teams being good or bad. I've never been one to put a whole lot of stock in, okay, well, this team's going to suck or that team's going to suck or they'll win this game in week 11 because you just don't know what teams are going to come out of nowhere and, what teams are going to be better than we think. Now, that's not to say it isn't some sort of a place to start, but I guess my point is, where was my point? We were talking about the defense, so let me go back to that, and I think I like Gus Bradley as a defensive coordinator. I mean, maybe I don't. There's a reason he's not a head coach anymore. And last year the Colts allowed 427 points, which was worst in the AFC actually, and third worst in the league behind the Cardinals and the Bears. And that was with Stephon Gilmore, who's now with Dallas. And their only Pro Bowler last year was Quentin Nelson off their offensive line, who we think's probably going to be okay. Their offensive line, that is. So I'm leery of that defense. Bradley's in his second year, so maybe his schemes and whatnot are a little more familiar this year. But I'm sitting on the fence, and that would be the only reason that I would think maybe we don't want to look at Colts unders during the year. It's sort of to be determined, but I think if the Colts are going to win, it's going to, in my mind, probably have to be more on their ability to score points than their ability to stop people, and that's probably especially the case in that division because Jacksonville's going to put up a bunch, and Houston's going to sort of revamp their whole offense and probably be, and they're not going to be Air Coryell, but they'll probably be letting Stroud throw the ball a whole lot more than they did sort of with Davis Mills, and Tennessee has the ability to put up points. So I think they're going to have to match some teams, and I don't think their defense is going to shut down people. I could be wrong, but if it's based on history and what they have left over, I say their defense is below average.
All right. Listening to you talk here, I think that you made one thing clear is that the Colts' biggest nemesis on defense could actually be the Colts' offense. Like, you can't have a lot of 3-and-outs. Like, they're going to have to at least try to keep that defense off the field because, like you're saying, you think they're a little below average. I think that they're probably about average. If that defense is going, or if that offense is going off the field, 3-and-out, 3-and-out, 3-and-out each and every game, every week, like that defense is eventually going to get really discouraged, really pissed off. And then even some of these bad quarterbacks or well below average quarterbacks that they're going to face, they're going to go out there and do damage anyways. And then the whole thing falls apart and they'll never get to that 6.5 wins. I like the head coach. I think that was a pretty good hire. Obviously, the Eagles OC. Eagles offense last year arguably could have been one of the best in the league. So I do think the Colts have that working for them. I mean, 6.5 looks fair. Based just off of this roster and based off of this schedule, I would lean towards the over. I do not like the fact that Jonathan Taylor is not going to be on this team, but maybe sometimes even though you lose talent, you lose a headache in a sense, and you don't have to worry about, like, can we depend on this guy? Is he going to be with us or not? Da, 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 da. You'd rather have that done and out of the way before you actually go out there and kick the football off. It's tough. I mean, I don't know which way to go. I lean over. I would not have this ticket in my pocket, but, we do have to go ahead and preview some of these teams that we haven't done yet. And if you guys haven't seen all the videos that we've been putting up on pregame.com on our YouTube channel, all of those are over there at pregame.com. We've done, I don't know how many we've done. We've done probably about 20 some teams right now. So This was one of the teams we had left. So, Uncle Dave, I'll go ahead. I'll make it official here. Official lean for me over to 6.5 on the Colts. You're thinking lean under. This isn't a bet that you're gonna make there, Uncle Dave, is it or no?
It might be. I guess I'm kind of waiting. I mean, I haven't kept up with the Colts a whole lot, and I just go back to when who's the guy that said Richardson would start in his rookie season? That was Jim Irsay, not Steichen, and admittedly he didn't say when he'd start, which that could mean Gardner Minshew starts the season. I don't know. And as far as I'm concerned, um, Richardson's more dangerous with his feet than his arm, and I would feel better early on if Minshew started. I'm just not high on Richardson. There's a litany of quarterbacks that have come into the NFL living on their athleticism, and for many years they lived in high school and college of just being athletically better. But not a lot of them have made good, and we can all tick off a list of those guys. You can start with Jamarcus Russell, but there's a whole lot more. So I may bet that under. I want to see week 3 preseason and what their starters are going to look like. But I would certainly not bet the over. How's that sound?
All right. Well, at least it sounds like we're kind of both on the fence here, but we kind of have a direction that we're both leaning in. So that'll wrap up the Indianapolis Colts team preview. Like I said, make sure you guys check out the rest of the team previews that we've done right here at pregame.com. Hey guys, if you enjoy our content and want even more videos from pregame.com, hit that subscribe button right now. I promise you will not find better sports betting information anywhere else.